Hello, my name is Louis. Today you will learn how the layer menu works. The new layer command adds a new, empty layer in the layer stack of the image, just above the active layer. The command displays a dialog in which you can specify the size of the new layer. New from visible command merges the visible layers into a new layer at the top of the layer stack. The aim is to further manipulate the result, but keep the steps that created this situation. Example: you want to selectively blur some areas of your multi-layer image. You create a new layer from what you see, blur it, and then apply a layer mask to erase the parts you want your original work to show. The new layer group command creates a new layer group directly. You can group layers that have similarities in a tree-like way, so the layer list becomes easier to manage. The duplicate layer command adds a new layer to the image which is a nearly identical copy of the active layer. The name of the new layer is the same as the name of the original layer, but with copy appended to it. If you duplicate a background layer which does not have an alpha channel, the new layer is provided with one. In addition, if there are any parasites attached to the active layer, they are not duplicated. If you have created a floating selection, a temporary layer, called a floating layer, or floating selection is added to the layer stack. As long as the floating layer persists, you can work only on it. To work on the rest of the image, you must anchor the floating layer to the former active layer with the anchor layer command. If the image does not contain a floating selection, this menu entry is insensitive and grayed out. The merge down command merges the active layer with the layer just below it in the stack, taking into account the various properties of the active layer, such as its opacity and layer mode. The resulting merged layer will be a normal mode, and will inherit the opacity of the layer below. If the layer below is not opaque, or if it is in some mode other than normal, then this command will generally change the appearance of the image. The most common use of merge down is to construct a layer by starting with a base layer usually opaque and in normal mode so that you can see what you are doing, and adding a modification layer on top of it with whatever shape, opacity, and layer mode you need. In this case, merging down the modification layer will combine the two layers into one without changing the way the image looks. The delete layer command deletes the current layer from the image. The layer stack is simply the list of layers in the layers dialog. The stack submenu contains operations which either select a new layer as the active layer or change the position of the active layer in the layer stack. If your image has only one layer, these commands are grayed out. The mask submenu of the layer menu contains commands which work with masks, creating a mask, applying a mask, deleting a mask, or converting a mask into a selection. The add layer mask command adds a layer mask to the active layer. It displays a dialog in which you can set the initial properties of the mask. If the layer already has a layer mask, the menu entry is insensitive and grayed out. A layer mask lets you define which parts of the layer are opaque, semi-transparent or transparent. The Apply Layer Mask command merges the layer mask with the current layer. The transparency information in the layer mask is transferred to the alpha channel that is created if it doesn't exist, and the layer mask is removed. The Delete Layer Mask command deletes the active layer's layer mask without modifying the active layer itself. The Show Layer Mask command lets you see the layer mask better by turning the image invisible. When you click on the menu entry, a check is displayed next to it, and the layer mask's thumbnail in the Layers dialog is shown with a green border. The layer itself is not modified, you can turn it visible again later. The Show Layer Mask command lets you see the layer mask better by turning the image invisible. When you click on the menu entry, a check is displayed next to it, and the layer mask's thumbnail in the Layers dialog is shown with a green border. The layer itself is not modified, you can turn it visible again later. When you uncheck it, the layer itself becomes the active component, and it is displayed with the white border. You can also activate the component you want more simply by clicking on it in the Layers dialog. As soon as you create a layer mask, it acts on the image. The Disable Layer Mask command allows you to suspend this action. When you click on the menu entry, a check is displayed next to it, and the border of the layer mask's thumbnail in the Layers dialog turns red. The Mask to Selection command converts the layer mask of the active layer into a selection, which replaces the selection that is already active in the image. White areas of the layer mask are selected, black areas are not selected, and gray areas are converted into feathered selections. The Transparency submenu contains commands which use or affect the alpha channel of the active layer. Add alpha channel. An alpha channel is automatically added into the channel dialog as soon as you add a second layer to your image. It represents the transparency of the image. If your image has only one layer, this background layer has no alpha channel. In this case, you can add an alpha channel with this command. This command removes the alpha channel of the active layer, keeping the alpha channels of the other layers. If the active layer is not the background layer, transparency is replaced with the background color of the toolbox. The Color to Alpha command makes transparent all pixels of the active layer that have a selected color. An alpha channel is created. It will attempt to preserve anti-aliasing information by using a partially intelligent routine that replaces weak color information with weak alpha information. In this way, areas that contain an element of the selected color will maintain a blended appearance with their surrounding pixels. The Semi-Flatten filter helps those in need of a solution to anti-aliasing indexed images with transparency. The GIF indexed format supports complete transparency, but not semi-transparency. Semi-transparent pixels will be transformed to no transparency, or complete transparency, ruining anti-aliasing you applied to the logo you want to put onto your web page. Before applying the filter, it's essential that you should know the background color of your web page. Use the color picker to determine the exact color which pops up as the foreground color of the toolbox. Invert foreground/background colors so that background color is the same as web background color. The Threshold Alpha command converts semi-transparent areas of the active layer into completely transparent. or completely opaque areas based on a threshold you set between 0 and 255. It only works on layers of RGB images which have an alpha channel. If the image is grayscale or indexed, or if the layer does not have an alpha channel, the menu entry is insensitive and grayed out. If the Keep Transparency option is checked in the Layers dialog, the command displays an error message. The Alpha to Selection command creates a selection in the current layer from the alpha channel, which encodes transparency. Opaque areas are fully selected, transparent areas are unselected, and translucent areas are partially selected. The selection replaces the existing selection. The alpha channel itself is not changed. The Transform submenu of the Layer menu contains commands which flip or rotate the active layer of the image. The Arbitrary Rotation command rotates a layer by a specified angle. It is an alternate way of accessing the Rotate tool. The Offset command shifts the content of the active layer. Anything shifted outside the layer boundary is cropped. This command displays a dialog which allows you to specify how much to shift the layer and how to fill the space that is left empty by shifting it. In Gimp, a layer is not always the same size as the image it belongs to. It might be smaller or it might be larger, in which case some parts of it are hidden. The Layer Boundary Size command displays a dialog in which you can set the dimensions for the active layer. This command changes the dimensions of the layer, but it does not scale its contents. The Layer to Image Size command resizes the layer boundaries to match the image boundaries, without moving the contents of the layer with respect to the image. The Scale Layer command resizes the layer and its contents. The image loses some of its quality by being scaled. The command displays a dialog where you can set parameters concerning the size of the layer and the image quality. The Crop to Selection command crops only the active layer to the boundary of the selection by removing any strips at the edge, whose contents are all completely unselected. Areas which are partially selected, for example, by feathering, are not cropped. If there is no selection for the image, the menu entry is insensitive and grayed out. The Auto Crop Layer command automatically crops the active layer, unlike the Crop tool, or the Crop Layer command which let you manually define the area to be cropped. This command removes the largest possible area around the outside edge which all has the same color. It does this by scanning the layer along a horizontal line and a vertical line, and cropping the layer as soon as it encounters a different color, whatever its transparency. You can use this command to crop the layer to the dimensions of a subject that is lost in a solid background which is too large